how to get the best results with the Canon R6 in terms of dynamic range. What's up guys, Dan Furlani here and welcome back to a new video. If you're new to this channel, there's one thing you need to know. I make videos with and about the Canon 90D, the Canon EOS R, the Canon R6 and the Canon M50. In this case I'm using the Canon R6. What do I talk about today? I want to help you figure out how to get the best results with the Canon R6 in terms of dynamic range. And more in the specific, the picture profile, the picture style you should use. But let's start. What's dynamic range? Dynamic range defines how much of the details we'll see high up in the highlights and deep down in the shadows. For example, human eye has a very wide dynamic range because, for example, now I can see the details of things right there in the sun where it's really bright, and at the same time I can see what's there in the shadows, like the details of a trunk of a tree or stuff like that. However, with cameras, it's not like that. They don't have that dynamic range. They're not human eyes. Somehow we're limited. In this case, with the Canon R6, we have a certain dynamic range that allows us to expose one scene by balancing the highlights and the shadows. Anyway, now there are some clouds, so the light is changing every so often. Sorry about that. So the Canon R6 has a quite decent dynamic range, but however good, however wide, it's not a human eye. So we are limited. When do we see that? When do we notice this limitation? Well, that's very easy. When we try to expose correctly a scene where the highlights are very bright, in contrast with the shadows, really dark. Usually we have to make a choice. So we should decide whether to expose more on the shadows to catch some more details from the shadows, or to expose for the highlights. So in that case we make sure the image is not blown out. When we expose for the shadows, yes, we get more details in the shadows, but at the same time we're overexposing so much the highlights and everything would be blown out. Opposite problem when we expose for the highlights. On one side we make sure the image is not completely blown out, like in the highlights. So we preserve that and it looks nice, in the highlights. But what about the shadows? Everything will be like very dark, almost impossible to recover without getting so much digital noise, and there would be no details or almost no details in the shadows. But let's see, so what's the best picture profile or picture style on our camera, like in this case the Canon R6, to get the most out of its dynamic range? I ran a couple of tests, very basic, where I've been using one of the default picture styles. In my opinion, and not only my opinion, it's a matter of fact, the only one that can give us some flexibility in post. Also in terms of dynamic range, the neutral picture style. I didn't use any of the other ones because, you know, when you use a default picture style, it's like you already have a kind of a color grading where the highlights and the shadows are well defined there. You can't really recover shadows or highlights when you use one of them, like fine detail or portrait and so on. The neutral is the only one that can give us some more dynamic range and some more details in the shadows and in the highlights. It's not a flat profile, but better than nothing. The other one I tried very quick is C-Log, the original C-Log 1 and C-Log 3. So I started with the neutral and I exposed for the highlights, trying not to blow out the highlights. I'm buzzing, let's drink up, you look like big. And then I tried to recover the shadows. Like that Marvin Gaye song, I'm stunning, you love it, come on, give me something, I know that you want it, come on, give. But in my opinion, even though I was surprised by the results, by the way, even though the results are not bad, they're not really good either. No matter how hard I tried, underexposing the shadows so much, even if I can bring back some details, it's like there's no consistency, there's almost no color, and there's no way you can just increase the saturation. It would just look like. So then I tried to overexpose it, exposing for the shadows. trying to preserve all details from the shadows. By doing so, I overexposed everything else way too much, so that all details in the highlights were just almost completely gone. Then I tried C-Log, the C-Log 1, the original, and much better. I didn't really have to push it, like exposing directly for the highlights or the shadows, but I could balance it like decently. Even though the sun is very bright and the shadows are quite dark, but it's pretty balanced. Let me know what you think about it. Leave a comment down below, hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. And check the links in the description to see all my gear stuff and things. My gear. Then I tried C-Log 3, and man, it was so much easier to color grade. It's like everything is there. I feel like the dynamic range we get with our Canon R6 when we use C-Log 3 is just great. Like with C-Log 1, we're able to get some good image. Then we have to work on it pretty much to make it like not presentable, but to make it look really good. But when we use C-Log 3, even with just some basic color grading, it just looks awesome. Again, let me know what you think about it. Leave a comment down below and hit the like button. When I was filming ISO 800, which is the native, like the basic ISO for C-Log 3, I thought it was overexposed, but it actually wasn't. I mean, not much. Meaning, what you see when you shoot in C-Log, even with view assist on, what you see from the screen is deceiving. Even if you see that it's overexposed on the screen and from the indicator, it won't. So my advice when you shoot in C-Log 3, overexpose it. I mean, when you think it's exposed correctly, just adjust a little bit more up, like 1 notch, 1.5. Don't worry about it. Then I also try to expose for the highlights, to see if I could recuperate the details in the shadows. And the results were decent. But in my opinion, the best way to expose, to shoot a video with a Canon R6 using C-Log 3 is by overexposing it a little bit. So, in the end, how do we get the best dynamic range out of our Canon R6? Shoot in C-Log 3, overexpose it a little bit, and you're good to go. Alright, I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, smash the like button right now and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys in the next video.